contributing factors versus determining factors. This is about the juxtaposition between external elements that contribute to your circumstance, keyword contribute to your circumstance, and the internal elements that ultimately determine your outcomes, keyword determine outcomes. There is a huge difference between these two, and I want to explain this difference and make it super clear such that you understand that while one may seem to be the main thing in your way or the main thing causing your situation, the other is the one that actually makes the final decision should you choose to make said decision. And one thing about decisions, folks, is that if you fail, neglect, or delay making a decision, it's not that the decision never happens, it's just that a decision gets made for you. I would suggest ahead of time, before we even get into the points of the topic here today, that you resolve to make decisions such that decisions are not made for you. Because usually when anything other than you gets to make decisions about you, you usually end up getting something that you don't want. So let's get into these points, keeping that thought top of mind. Point number one, topic once again is contributing factors versus determining factors. First of all, a contributing factor is an externality. That's all it is. We discussed externalities in episode 1879, where I told you externalities are not excuses. What is an externality? Again, it's an external factor. What does external mean? External means everything other than you personally and completely under your control. Anything that's not completely under your control is an externality. If it rains outside tomorrow, that is an externality. If your dog gets sick, that is an externality. If a kid comes home crying with a broken leg, that is an externality. Why? Because you do not control any of these things. Now, you may hope to influence them. We'll get to that, but you don't control them. Externalities are anything that is completely outside of your control or even somewhat outside of your control. It becomes an externality. You don't control your next door neighbor if they decide to have a party and there's loud music blasting. You don't control that. Now, you can do something about it, but you don't control the decision that they made to throw the party in the first place. That makes it an externality. So let me give you some high level things that are outside of your control. Other people are outside of your control. Every human on the planet other than you is outside of your control. Again, they may be under your influence, but they're not under your control. The weather, outside of your control. The situation you were born into is out of your control. You don't control the fact that you're from Indonesia. You don't control the fact that your parents are both 5 feet 7 inches tall and you're only going to be 5 feet 4 inches tall and you want to be an NBA player. You don't control the externality that set you up into that situation. You don't control if you were born completely broke in the projects or you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and a $10 million trust fund the day that you came home from the hospital. You don't control any of that stuff. They are all outside of your control. The decision that other people make that are not you, you don't control them. Random happenings that could be either fortuitous or challenging for you, out of your control. You're driving and someone is texting on their phone and you stop at a red light, and because they're texting, they don't notice the stoppage and they run right into the back of your car. Yes, their insurance will cover it, hopefully, but you still are out of a car, at least your car, let's say, for the next 3 weeks while your car is at the collision shop getting fixed. All right, that's out of your control because you didn't control the fact that that other person wasn't paying attention and he ran into the back of your car. These are all externalities. You control none of them. A fortuitous situation, you don't control that either. When I was in college, my freshman year, the summer after my freshman year, before my sophomore year, I was hanging out on the campus at Penn State out Abington. Not hanging out, actually. That's incorrect language. Let me correct that. I wasn't hanging out. I was walking around the campus because I would go up there every single day to work on my game on the basketball court in the beautiful gym they have at Penn State Abington. Last time I was there, the gym's still there. Beautiful gym still to this day. One of my favorites. And I walked over to the cafeteria to get some food. A random guy approached me. He happened to be a basketball coach at a different school, Penn State Altoona. He ended up recruiting me on the spot, and I finished my collegiate career at Penn State Altoona. The significance of that was that Penn State Abington, the school I had been at, allowed only 2 years of athletics at the time that I was there. Therefore, I only had one more year on my clock, so to speak, as an athlete in college, had I not found another school to go to. And this guy randomly running into me, his name is Kenny Macklin, him running into me on the Abington campus was a very fortuitous situation for me because at Altoona, I could play 4 years of college sports. I already had used one, so I still had 3 years of eligibility left had I played at a school that had 4 years of sports, and Altoona was that. So did I control that? No. That was an externality. I didn't control the fact that he was there that day. Didn't control the fact that I happened to be walking by at the same time that he was sitting there watching. He could have been in any other building on the campus. I could have been anywhere else at a 10 minutes sooner or later and never would have ran into this guy. And these are all externalities. All right. I want to be clear that I'm not telling you that these things don't matter. All right. Externalities do matter. If you plan a picnic in the park today and it's raining outside, does that matter? Yes, because now you're probably not going to have your picnic. If you are physically short, and again, both of your parents are short and they handed you some genes of being a short person, does that matter? Yeah, because now you're probably not going to be tall. However, something mattering and something being the main reason why you are in the situation that you're in, those are not the same things. Something mattering and being the main cause of your circumstance are not the same. Even if you may want to call it the main cause of your circumstance, I would suggest that you not do that, because anytime you give an externality the power of being the main cause of your circumstance, what you are doing is giving away your power. When you give the power to the externality, you have no power remaining for yourself. So if I say the main reason that my situation is because of something that's out of my control, well, that means the power to change my situation is also out of my control. That's an issue. It's not a good thing. Okay, so something mattering and something being the main reason are not the same. Be careful that you don't get these confused, because externalities, as I already told you, they are contributing factors. What is a contributing factor? Contributing factor is giving into the main body of a circumstance. The main body of the circumstance is not the contributor itself. Just like branches are not the main part of a tree. All right, there may be a whole lot of branches, but the main part of the tree is the trunk going down into the roots, which are dug into the ground, which is why the tree is in the spot that it's in. You can remove all the branches from a tree, it's still a tree, because the trunk is still there and the roots are still in the ground, then it's still a tree. Now you remove the roots and pull it up out the ground, now you got a situation. But before that, it's still a tree. It's still in its spot. So the contributing factors that you deal with in your life, or that you're dealing with right now, they can give you an excuse to fail. They can give you a reason to succeed. Good news is you have a choice. And what I just tell you, you don't make a choice or a decision or a choice will be made for you. You have undoubtedly heard stories of people who have taken contributing factors that most people use as excuses and instead use those same contributing factors as reasons to be successful. Contributing factors can be excuses or they can be reasons. They usually won't be both. Now, the good thing is they can be one and they can become another. You can say, my excuse is I'm at the school that only allows 2 years of sports, so that must mean my career is going to be over after next season. Or you can use it as a reason. I only got 2 years to play sports at this school, therefore, I'm going to use that as a reason to make sure I go find another place to play when these 2 years are up. All right. Same circumstance, just a different framing of how you want to look at it. Is it an excuse or is it a reason? Someone who's born with, let me back up. So people who are able to turn their externalities into reasons rather than excuses, they get to tell their success stories. The success stories that we hear from anyone, whether they're a book writer, podcaster, TED speaker, motivational talker, influencer on the internet, whatever. These stories are all of people who have dealt with some type of externality, contributing factor that they probably didn't want, but they figured out how to become successful anyway. Is this true or not? Someone who's born with a debilitating disease, a person from a underprivileged background, a kid who was forced to grow up without their parents, someone who's had something really unlucky to them happen to them, such as a car accident or some childhood disease that they didn't have any control over having. The fact that they became successful anyway is why they are celebrated. The reason we celebrate success stories is not because of the success. We celebrate because of the externalities that were overcome in order to get to the success. Because if someone just has success, but they didn't have to go through anything to get to the success, we're not really that impressed by that person. Why? Because they didn't go through anything. Now, going through something is what makes the story interesting. I knew a guy who was a professional speaker. As a matter of fact, I saw this guy maybe about 3-4 months ago. I was warming up to run outside of my building here in Miami. And this guy, I know he's not from Miami, but I was warming up and I had my headphones in, so I didn't really hear him. He walked up to me and he's saying my name, and I'm looking at him. At first, I didn't even recognize the guy, but I do know who he is. We spoke for about 2 minutes. He was basically backpacking across the country. It was what he was doing. He was staying at a hotel, which is right across the street from my building. And anyway, I'm bringing this guy up to say that his He was a professional speaker, motivational speaker. The last I saw him, I don't know what he's doing these days. I didn't really ask him. I was really trying to get ready for my run, wanted to get away from me. But after we chatted for 2 minutes, I thought about him, and I'm thinking about him now. And his story, the basically the material, the source material for his motivational speaking career was that he was living a normal life, normal, no white kid, suburban life, and he ended up getting on drugs. He's on drugs for several years. He finally gets clean and gets off the drugs. And his claim to fame, so to speak, for being a motivational speaker was that he had been on drugs and got off the drugs. Now, technically, he had basically fucked himself up and then unfucked himself, which is what he did. But the fact that he unfucked himself, even though he's the one who did the fucking in the first place, is what made it a success story. And he got to go and give speeches based on that background. Now, I'm not telling you that if you want to be a motivational speaker, you need to go become a drug addict. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that he had to overcome something in order to have some credibility. And externalities overcome are what lead to success stories that people want to hear. Again, I'm not saying yours got to be that one, but get my drift. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is contributing factors versus determining factors. So now you know what a contributing factor is. What is a determining factor? A determining factor are all the internalities. These are the things happening in your own mind, the things that you say to and about yourself. Those are the determining factors. Here is the 1% of life that you have control over. In case you didn't know, 99% of life is outside of your control. 99% of life is outside of your control. The things all those things I mentioned in point number 1, you don't control any of those. And that encompasses 99% of what happens in life. So internalities, internal factors are all based in the way you think, the way you choose to frame the circumstance in front of you, how you choose to look at yourself, and the decisions that you make about all of the above. Because the decisions you make about all of the above lead to the actions that you take. Let me say those things again. How you think, how you frame circumstances, and how you look at yourself. The way that those 3 work lead to how you think, or not how you think, but how you decide on things, and that decision leads to your actions. And we know that actions lead to outcomes. Outcomes lead to how you live, your results, your habits, your character, your virtue, and everything else about your life. So when we say that a person is determined, when you describe someone as determined, what does that mean? When your 3-year-old child is determined about getting a certain toy from mommy or daddy, what are we saying about the 3-year-old child? We're saying that they have made a decision that they're going to get that toy, and they are fully focused on getting that toy, and they're not going to stop until or unless they get the toy. That's what we mean when we say someone's determined, right? We're saying this person has made a decision that a certain outcome is going to be achieved, and they will deal with whatever friction may be in the way, whatever challenges may arise in order to achieve said outcome. Here's an interesting thing about being determined. And if you think about your own situation, and any time that you were fully determined on something, that when you're fully determined, you don't notice the friction. When you're fully determined, you don't notice the challenges as much as you would when you're not fully determined. See, when you're halfway committed to doing something, you notice all the challenges, all the friction, all the things and reasons why things might not work, all the people telling you that you probably should wait until later, everyone trying to advise you that it's not going to go the way that you want it to go. See, when you're halfway committed to something, you notice all of those things, and those are the very things that slow you down because of the fact that you're noticing them in the first place. But when you are determined, i.e. your focus is narrowed and you have that tunnel vision and you only see your outcome, yes, the friction still exists. Yes, the challenges still exist. Yes, the naysayers still exist. Yes, all the people trying to slow you down and get in your way still exist, but all of a sudden you don't notice them. And the interesting thing about not noticing things is that they tend to not bother you. Isn't that interesting? I'm being facetious here, but I want you to catch what I'm saying. Isn't it interesting that when you don't notice things, they stop bothering you? Any of you ever had some type of physical ailment? Your tooth is hurting, you got a headache, your back's bothering you, your knee is feeling a little stiff when you woke up this morning, and then you needed to do something that mattered a lot to you, whether it's because it was an emergency situation, there was some pressure on your back, or you were excited about an outcome that came on the back end of some action you needed to take, and all of a sudden in the process of taking that action, you didn't feel that toothache anymore, your back wasn't bothering you anymore, your knee wasn't hurting anymore. All of a sudden it's like all that pain and that nagging issue just disappeared for about 20 minutes while you did that thing, or 2 hours or 3 days or however long it took for you to deal with that thing. Magic formula, ladies and gentlemen. What you focus on, you create more of, and what you ignore, it dissipates and disappears. It's almost as if it doesn't exist. And in your world, it literally does not. What you ignore does not exist. What you focus on and pay attention to gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So anything you would like to enlarge in your life, you need to focus on it more. And anything you want to get rid of, you need to ignore it, and it will disappear. It will find its way to the exit. It will disappear. I would get people asking me all the time, Dre, how do I avoid distraction? I told them, you're asking the wrong question. Avoiding distraction is the wrong question. If you're feeling physical pain right now, you're asking the wrong question. How do I avoid this pain, or how to get rid of this pain? Instead, you need to ask yourself, how do I find focus on something on which I can be so determined and so locked in on that anything else that could possibly get in my way or slow me down, I don't notice, and therefore it does not exist. What you do not notice does not exist. This is just human nature. Understand, folks, that objective reality is not a thing. Objective reality is a oxymoron. There's no such thing as objective reality. My objective reality and your objective reality are completely different. So if I'm here in Miami, Florida, and I look out my window, I see Miami. If you're in Seattle, Washington, you look out your window, you see Seattle. We're both looking out the window, but the objective reality of what I see and the objective reality of what you see, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes verbally when I say objective reality, they ain't the same. Is either one of us lying about what we see out the window? No. But objective reality is different for me than it is for you. And guess what? If I go to the other side of the house and look out the window, I'm going to see something completely different. The objective reality has changed. Reality is subjective, ladies and gentlemen. What that means is whatever you choose to pay attention to is your reality, and what you choose to ignore is not your reality. Doesn't mean it's not there. It just means you're not noticing it. And if you don't notice it, it's not there. If a tree falls in the forest and you're not there to hear it, does it make a sound to you? No, it doesn't make a sound. It only makes a sound if you hear it. If you don't hear it, it's no sound. Everybody following what I'm saying here? So when you are willing to deal with the friction and the challenges to achieve your outcome, that's what we call determined. Or if you're so determined that the friction and challenges, again, though they exist, they don't exist to you. All right, that's determination. That's why these are called determining factors. Because the only thing that determines where you end up in life is you. The only thing that determines where you end up in life is you. Do the circumstances contribute? Yes. Do other people contribute? Yes. Does the weather contribute? Yes. Does where you're born contribute? Yes. Does your background and your genetic code contribute? Absolutely. Do they determine the outcome? No. I'm leaving that pause there because I want that point to sink in. A contributing factor becomes a determining factor with your permission. And if you decide that a contributing factor will not be the determining factor, then it ceases to exist as a determining factor. It is no longer eligible. You're the boss. You can bring things in, you can kick things out. Think of the stories of people you know who have been celebrated for their achievements. We just talked about this in point number one. It's almost always because they had to overcome something that slowed down and stopped others, and them being the exception is what made them the story. See, what made them the story is the fact that they took things that other people allowed to stop them, and they didn't allow it to stop them. That is literally the determining factor. When I ended up out of the college basketball program in school at Penn State Altoona, where I ended up going, because a coaching change happened and other things happened. When I ended up out of the basketball program, that was a contributing factor. Contributing factor was the new coach came in. Contributing factor is I'm not on the basketball team anymore. Contributing factor is I'm at this Division III college where no pro scouts come to the game, so nothing you do here is really going to help you become a pro, no matter how good or bad of a player you are. These were all contributing factors. The determining factor was that I was going to figure out a way to get myself into the next level of the game, regardless of the circumstances around me. And because I ended up doing what I was determined to do, now I can talk about it with authority. I've written books about the subject. I've talked about it here on the show. I've made courses, coached other people and trained other people and consulted other people on doing the exact thing that I did. Not because I'm so amazingly talented or anything like that, but because I decided that my circumstances would not be my determiners. I decided that my decision would determine the outcome. And because my decision brought me through so much friction of circumstances, that made the story even more interesting. All right, and that's the determining factor. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is contributing factors versus determining factors. Number 3, contributing factors exist to give you the option to use or not use your determining factors. So here's the good thing about contributing factors, that again, they give you the option. They give you some options in front of you, and you can choose what to do about it. This is the essence of what separates one person from the next person, by the way. The essence of what separates one from the next, especially people who have similar circumstances, i.e. contributing factors, what separates one from the next is the determining factors that each has or chooses to use, is actually a better way of saying it. Understand that every human being on this planet has a story. Everyone listening to me right now, you have a story, she has a story, he has a story, they have a story. And by a story, I mean we've all gone through things that we did not necessarily want to go through. So when I say a story, that's what I mean. The interesting part of your story is not all the stuff that worked. The interesting part of your story is the stuff that didn't work. All right, so when I say a story, I'm talking about that part. No one's interested in the story of everything working. Right? What makes your story interesting is when things went haywire and completely off the rails. All right, so all of you have something like that in your life, right? All of you probably have many of those if you think about it. And everybody has a story. And if we had a choice to go through life without having to deal with those negative things, many of us would probably say, well, hey, if I could do it all over again, just leave that part out where it didn't work. All right. If I could go through basketball again, I might initially say, no, just leave the part out where I ended up out of the basketball program. Just have me averaging 30 points a game for 4 years straight at this Division III college and being an All-American at the Division III level. How about the story go that way? Maybe it would have been a little bit easier for me. And perhaps it would have been. The problem is, had the story gone that way, then my story as a person would not be the one that it is now. I couldn't talk about the same things that I talk about with the same level of authority and conviction that I have if I hadn't gone through the story. If I hadn't had to eat the shit sandwich, then I wouldn't be able to talk about the things that I talk about here. Those of you not familiar with the concept of the shit sandwich, let me give you that episode. Some of you may not be familiar. That was episode number 1663. So, no human on the planet doesn't go through stuff, all right, to get to where they are, at least not the successful ones. You are not an exception to the point. And even though going through the stuff made things harder on us, the fact that things were harder and that we became successful anyway is what makes the story interesting. And that's what makes us interesting. Everyone has to go through the stuff that they either have been going through or are going through or are about to go through and don't even know they're about to go through it. No exceptions. So going through the stuff is not what separates one person from the next. It's if you keep going after you go through the stuff, or you keep going while the stuff is taking place. That's what separates one person from the next. What do you do when the contributing factors start making themselves known? What do you do when you have a picnic and it starts raining? What do you do when you're supposed to be playing basketball but you're not on the team anymore? What do you do when things are supposed to go one way but they actually go the other way? What do you do in that situation? How do you deal with that? I remember reading one of Donald Trump's books. This is pre-politics Donald Trump. He talked about how at one point he was like 6 billion with a B, $6 billion in debt from some business deals going wrong. And he was walking around the streets of Manhattan and he walked past this homeless guy laying on the sidewalk begging for change. And Trump said he thought to himself, man, this homeless guy is $6 billion richer than I am, because at least he's at zero. I'm $6 billion in the red. And the point being, the fact that we know who Trump is today, the fact that he was up financially, then he was down, and then he got back up again and done it multiple times, is one of the things that makes him interesting. It's one of the things that makes his story worth listening to, whether you listen to it to hate him or you listen to it to love him. It's a story worth listening to because he's going through some stuff and he kept going. Question is, what makes your story worth listening to? What have you gone through? What separates one from the next is what we do when the contributing factors start making themselves known, or they make themselves, in the case of Donald Trump, really obvious, where everybody in the world, you're walking down the street in Manhattan, everyone knows you're the guy who's $6 billion in debt because it's on the front page of the newspaper. What do? Do you allow the contributing factors to have the final say, or do you employ your determining factors? This is a rhetorical question coming from me to you, not a rhetorical question coming from you to you. Let's recap today's class, which is contributing factors versus determining factors. Point number 1, contributing means externalities, external factors. Talked about this in episode 1879. They're simply things that are outside of your control. A rule of thumb, everybody, 99% of what happens in life is outside of your control. All right, so most things are contributing factors. Almost everything that is occurring in your life right now is a contributing factor. Maybe you did something that led to it. It's still a contributing factor. If you don't control it 1,000%, it is a contributing factor. Point number 2, determining factors. These are the internal stuff. This is the internal stuff. These are the things you have full 100% control over. And just to let you all know, the only thing you always have full 100% control over is the way you think. That's it. That's the only thing you always, I guarantee, no matter who you are, you always have full 100% control over how you think. You don't even always control your body. If the police come grab you and put handcuffs on you, you don't have control over how you move your arms. And so you can lose control of your physical body. You never lose control of your mental capacity. As long as you're alive, you can control the way you think. You can. Doesn't mean you do, but you can. That's the determining factor. This is the 1% of life that you have control over. Okay? And this is based on the way you think, the way you choose to frame a circumstance, and how you choose to look at yourself. All of those happen in your head. None of those are physical. How you think, how you frame, how you look at yourself. These all happen in your own mind. Those lead to decisions. Decisions lead to actions. Actions lead to outcomes. All right, those are what the determining factors are about. Number 3, contributing factors exist to give you the option, keyword option, to use or not use your determining factors. Some people look at the contributing factors in their life or situation and say, you know what, I'm not going to try anything. So you decline your option to use your determining factors and you allow circumstance to have its way with you. On the other hand, you can go the opposite direction and say, these circumstances that are contributing to my situation, I'm going to change these. I'm going to change these. What is that? That is a decision. That's a determination. Then you use your determining factors. You already used one by even making that thought, having that thought, and saying those words. Use that to move yourself to action and go do something. Everybody catch how this works? Good. Now you need to go put it to use. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. That's where you can have me as your coach. I will show you how to put this specifically to use in your specific situation when it comes to your business, when it comes to your career, when it comes to your personal life, and everything you're doing professionally, and to make it work in a systematic, strategic, and continuous way. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all